Yo, what's up? I'm Coach RT3 from the Upgrade Guys, and today we're going to be talking about overhead position. Overhead position as it relates to anything you like to do overhead, now, whether that's a barbell press or whether that's a handstand, anything like that where you're going to be taking yourself overhead. It's going to be important that you be able to have strong shoulders in order to engage the stuff that you need and build the capacity that you need to do these activities. A lot of people jump into these activities without any form of foundational training, and remember, the skills that we have are built upon the capacity that we have to do them. So building a nice, broad, strong foundation for those things is going to be important. So when we talk about overhead things, we're talking about pressing overhead, we're talking about handstands, we're even talking about steel mace swinging because that's an overhead activity as well. So one of the ways I like to set up to train some overhead flexion is child's pose. If you're familiar with yoga, child's pose is like so. I'm going to put this towel down from head, and we're going to place our hands here. So now your hands go out in front of you. You can slide your hips back until your head is down on the floor. And we get into this child's pose and we just allow our tissues to relax. And we can push our hips back so we can walk our hands, push our hands back until our hips are back as far as we can get them. And we'll just hang out here. Now, hanging out here is important because we're just allowing these tissues here to stretch and lengthen. And that's important because we cannot have access to training tissues if we don't have the range to begin with. So we talk about this a lot as far as our passive and active range. Your passive range is what gives you potential to do the thing. But it doesn't stop there. Now that you have passive range, you must train that range. So ways in which we train that range is simply by creating isometric contractions at those lengths. So now if I get into child's pose again, most of the time in child's pose, yogis just use this pose as a rest position. So when I'm in yoga class, for example, I'll get into this pose as a rest position because the instructor usually is like, hey, take a rest in child's pose. So I'll push myself back into that position again. And now that I'm here, I'm allowing the tissues on the front side, so the lats, all this stuff through here, all these tissues to kind of just relax and drop in using the force of gravity. Now, after I've spent a couple of minutes here, what I can do is I can gently start to drive the hands into the floor, creating a little bit of extra force through this line of tissue. Okay, and so once you're doing that, we'll just ramp up to like 20-30%. So just a very light effort. No need to go super hard your first time doing this. We just want to get those tissues acclimated to creating force in that position. Now, it's important that we work both sides of the joint, so we would also work on the shortened tissue, which is the stuff on the back side of the joint, by trying to create a little bit of lift. So once again, spend 2 minutes passively stretching. Then you're going to begin to create force downward into the floor in order to engage this stuff here. And then after ramping for, let's say, at about 30% effort for about 20 seconds, we'll begin to pull the other direction and try to get a little bit of this back side of the tissue to work as well. Now, we talk a lot about overhead position. Of course, the fundamental movement of your joints are rotation. And so if you don't have internal and external rotation, it's going to be hard to achieve that overhead position in the first place. So that's probably where you want to start. But if you have adequate internal and external rotation, meaning you can rotate the joint the way a shoulder joint is supposed to, then we can start working the linear aspects a little bit more. And so if you're struggling with overhead position and you're struggling with getting overhead range of motion, you can start by trying to increase that passive range and then work to strengthen that range. And that should help strengthen those shoulders to do the things that you want to do. So remember, skill is built on top of capacity.
We build the foundational capacities, and then we start building the skill on top of that. If you're interested in learning more about this, or you're interested in doing some of the training that's required for this, check out our 15-minute mobility snacks on theupgradeguys.com. If you like this video and you found it useful in understanding how shoulder overhead range of motion might be affected by simply adding some isometric load, please subscribe to our channel and like this video.
Upgrade your shit.